Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually when we sit down to do this, we're wrestling with this massive stack of papers.
Right, trying to synthesize global trends, looking at big data.
Exactly. We're trying to find the signal in a whole lot of noise. But today,
Yeah.
today we're doing something completely different. We are going microscopic.
Microscopic is absolutely the right word. Instead of 1,000 data points, we're looking at just one.
A single sheet of paper.
A single letter, handwritten.
And honestly, sometimes one letter, if you really know how to read it, can tell you more about the human condition and American history than a whole textbook.
I love that you put it that way. It's so true.
Okay, so let's set the scene for everyone listening. Who is holding the pen here? Whose mail are we reading?
We're looking at a letter by a woman named Missouri Lyon Blackburn. And the context here is it's everything. We're in the mid-19th century, a time of huge upheaval.
Right.
Missouri has just gone from Cincinnati, Ohio, which you have to remember was this bustling industrial powerhouse, the Queen City of the West.
A real city.
A real city. And she's gone down to the rural backwoods of Kentucky, specifically a spot called Cliffsprings near Paintsville.
And just to be clear, because the Springs part can sound a little, idyllic, this is not a spa vacation.
No, far, far from it. This is more like a survival log. Missouri isn't visiting. She's escaping. She is a recently divorced woman.
And we have to pause on that. A divorced woman in the mid-1800s, that is not like today. That carries a heavy, heavy social price tag.
Oh, massive. It could be a social death sentence in a lot of circles. Kind of a scarlet letter situation.
Yeah.
She's split from her husband, Jonathan Blackburn, and she's taken her daughter, Fanny, and basically fled to her father's home on the frontier.
So the document we're looking at is a snapshot of a woman standing in the rubble of her old life, trying to, build a new one from scratch.
It feels like a movie script.
It really does. You have the urban sophisticate dropping into the wild. So let's start where she starts in the letter, the commute. Because she didn't just hop on a train.
No trains, no pavement, nothing like that. She writes that she arrived at the Springs exactly 1 week ago. And that journey from Cincinnati took an entire week.
7 days. Just to get from Ohio to eastern Kentucky, that really puts the infrastructure gap of that era into perspective.
It does. And she does not mince words about it. She describes the road as, and this is a quote, the roughest and most dangerous she had ever seen.
She mentions the jolting.
Yes. And jolting is such a polite Victorian way of saying she was probably being thrown around a carriage on. I mean, what were basically logs laid across mud.
Or just straight up rocks and creek beds.
Exactly. She says it gave her a severe headache.
Which sounds miserable, a 7-day concussion. But she does say she recovered after a few hours of rest. So the headache clears, she steps outside, and what does she see? What's the vibe of this new place?
This is where we get the first big contradiction in the letter, and it really sets the tone for everything else. She looks around and she calls it a most charming, romantic country.
Romantic in the classical sense, I assume, not like a date night.
Exactly.
Yeah?
Wild, untamed nature. It's scenic, it's quiet. She even says she'd be contented to remain there.
But there's a but.
There's always a but.
She adds.
If surrounded by my friends and those I love.
Ah, the loneliness.
It just cuts right through all that scenery.
Oh.
She says, and this is explicit, it's not very pleasant as have not a friend nor neighbor near.
That's the paradox of the frontier, isn't it? It's beautiful because it's empty, but because it's empty, you are completely alone.
And remember where she's coming from, Cincinnati. She's used to theater, commerce, crowds, noise. To go from that to the absolute silence of the Kentucky woods, that silence must have been deafening.
Well, she says no neighbors near, but she does eventually meet the locals, and this is where the letter gets spicy. She is not exactly coming at this with an open mind.
No, she's not.
Oh.
This section is a masterclass in culture shock. Her defense mechanism is judgment, pure judgment.
She does call them kind-hearted.
She does. She gives them that much.
But
in the very same breath, she calls them the most ignorant beings you have heard of.
Ouch. That is not subtle.
Not at all. It's raw. She notes that finding a person in the whole county who can read or write is quite a curiosity.
That line really stood out to me. We take literacy for granted, but for her, she's moved somewhere she can't communicate in writing with almost anyone. That's not just snobbery. That's real functional isolation.
Precisely. It's an intellectual wall. But where she really, really focuses her critique, and this is so typical for a woman of her class, is on the fashion.
The fashion police are on patrol. She writes to her sister, I wish you and Sally could be here and see the ladies I have to call on me.
She's treating them like a sideshow exhibit. She says she doesn't believe that even in the most distant part of Oregon, you'd find more irregular dressed creatures.
Creatures, yeah, she's dehumanizing them a bit there. Okay, so let's break down the Cliffsprings look. What are these women wearing that has her so worked up?
It's this fascinating mix of extreme practicality and what she just sees as poverty. She says they wear thin lawn dresses.
Okay, lawn. Let's define that. I'm thinking of grass, and I assume they're not wearing turf.
Right, no. Lawn is a textile. It's a very lightweight, semi-sheer linen or cotton, breezy. They also wear sunbonnets made of the same stuff.
Okay, so far, so reasonable. It's hot, they want a light fabric. Makes sense.
But it's the silhouette that it breaks Missouri's brain. She points out that the skirts only come down to their knees.
Whoa, to the knees in the mid-19th century. That sounds, knees were not for public viewing.
Well, there is a technicality. She says there's a deep ruffle or flounce that goes from the knee down to the top of their shoes.
Ah, okay.
So they're covered. But the construction is totally alien to her. It's likely a homemade fix to keep the hems out of the mud.
Which makes sense if you're walking on those rough and dangerous reds we just talked about.
Exactly. Form follows function. If you're dragging a floor-length silk skirt through Kentucky clay, it's ruined in 5 minutes. These women are adapting.
And speaking of function, the shoes. She's horrified they're wearing cowhide shoes.
Cowhide.
Yeah.
Not exactly delicate slippers.
No, cowhide is heavy, it's stiff, it's durable. These are working women. They're farming, walking miles. They need boots that can take a beating. Missouri sees ugly. They see survival.
And then there's the detail about what they aren't wearing. She says they dismiss hoops entirely.
This is a huge cultural marker.
Huge. At this time in the city, the crinoline, the hoop skirt, was everything. It was massive, totally impractical, and absolutely essential to be seen as fashionable.
So by not wearing hoops to Missouri, it's like they're walking around in their undergarments.
It signals they're completely disconnected from her world. To her, it looks primitive. To them, a hoop skirt in the woods would be a death trap. You'd get snagged on every single branch.
But the culture shock isn't just visual, it's behavioral. There's a social ritual that just completely baffles her.
The tobacco?
The tobacco pipes. This image is just fantastic. So vivid. Missouri writes that the women all smoke. And they don't just smoke casually. It is a central part of visiting. She says they never visit without their pipes and a calico bag full of tobacco.
So you have to picture this. You invite the neighbors over, they walk in, sit down, and just pull out a sack of tobacco and light up a pipe.
And the best part is their reaction to her. They aren't embarrassed. They're confused that she doesn't smoke. She writes they're very much astonished that I forego such a luxury.
Luxury. That one word does so much work there.
It really does. To these women, tobacco is a comfort in a hard life. The fact that this city woman turns it down, they probably look at her with pity, like, oh, you poor thing, you don't know how to relax.
It totally flips the script. Missouri thinks she's looking down on them, but they're looking at her like she's the weirdo.
That's the definition of culture shock. It goes both ways. But, I think it's important to point out, despite all her harsh words, the neighbors are actually treating her remarkably well.
They are. She admits they bring her gifts. Eggs, gourds, sweet-smelling herbs. These are gifts of sustenance. They're welcoming the stranger with food.
Which brings us to the economics of this whole thing. Because Missouri can critique the cowhide shoes, but she's the one who had to flee the city. How are they surviving?
Well, the pantry seems to be in good shape. She writes they have most excellent living.
Define excellent.
Protein. Lots and lots of protein. She mentions the men keep them supplied with squirrels, rabbits, pheasants, and all kinds of game.
It's the ultimate farm-to-table diet. Probably a lot healthier than whatever she'd get in a low-end boarding house in the city.
Very likely. So they aren't starving. But while the dinner table is full, the bank account is, well, it's a disaster waiting to happen.
And this is where the letter turns into a financial thriller. We find out why her father's really there. It's not just a farm.
No.
Yeah.
For the oil.
Black gold.
Missouri writes that her father has not yet commenced boring. That's the word for drilling. But he will in a few days. And he believes there's a prospect of abundance.
Prospect of abundance. That sounds like a gambler talking.
It is. We have to remember, the 1860s saw the very first massive oil booms in America. People were buying up land, hoping to punch a hole in the ground and become millionaires overnight. It was like the gold rush.
And you can feel their desperation for that payout because of the whole Shalito situation.
Right. This is a blink and you'll miss a detail, but it's crucial. She mentions a dispute over a bill at Chilito's.
And you have to understand, Shalito's wasn't just some store. It was the high-end department store in Cincinnati. It implies they skipped town with some serious unpaid debts.
Exactly. They owe money to the fancy merchants. And the way her father plans to handle it is, it's anxiety-inducing.
It's a total stall tactic.
He claims he was supposed to be paid in city property by a man named Longworth, another famous Cincinnati tycoon, and since he wasn't paid in cash, he's broke. So his plan is to tell Shalito to sue him.
He wants to get sued.
He wants to drag it out in court. He says, "Take me to court," hoping to delay any judgment until spring.
And why spring?
Because he assumes by then the oil will be flowing. He says the first money he gets from his oil, he will pay the bill.
Wow. Talk about high stakes. He is betting his legal standing, his reputation, everything on an oil well that doesn't even exist yet.
It just shows you how fragile their position is. They're eating squirrel stew and wearing hand-me-downs while holding off creditors with the promise of imaginary oil. It's a complete house of cards.
And speaking of hand-me-downs, the letter gives us a little peek into the domestic logistics, too. It's not all just waiting for oil.
No, there are kids involved. She mentions little Willie, seems to be a nephew or a relative, and she talks about recycling his clothes for Willie Taylor.
I have a lot of little Willie's clothes for Willie Taylor. It's such a grounding detail. Amidst the oil speculation and culture shock, someone still has to sort the laundry.
And manage health scares. She says little Willie had a severe fever. In a cabin miles from a doctor, a fever is a life or death event.
But her own daughter, Fanny.
Fanny is thriving. Missouri writes, "Fanny never was better. It seems the fresh air and the space are good for her."
So we have this really complex picture. The journey was hell. The neighbors are ignorant but generous. The finances are a total gamble, but the kid's healthy. But I want to get to the real engine of this letter. The why. Why is she there at all?
The emotional core. This is what makes the letter matter.
Missouri drops this bombshell about her own mental state. She says, "I am in excellent health and spirits never better."
Which on the surface is shocking. She's broke, she's isolated, she's surrounded by people she disdains. Why is she in such high spirits?
Because of the comparison. She says she is comparatively happy compared to the last 9 years of my life.
9 years, which happens to be the exact length of her marriage to Jonathan Blackburn.
And when she mentions him, the tone of the letter just,
Yeah,
it shifts. It stops being observational and it gets visceral.
it gets really dark. She writes, "The more I think of him, the more disgust and contempt I feel."
Disgust and contempt, those are not words of sadness. Those are words of hatred.
There is no ambivalence there. No, "Oh, it's a shame it didn't work out." She follows it up with, "I never want to see him again."
That one line just recontextualizes everything. Suddenly the cowhide shoes and the tobacco smoke, they don't matter.
Not at all. The ignorant neighbors. They're better than Jonathan. The rough road, better than the road back to him.
Yeah.
She is willing to endure all of this because the alternative, her life in Cincinnati with him, was a living hell.
She even says her only regret is not having the courage to take this step long, long ago.
And that's the tragedy and the triumph in one sentence. She regrets the lost time, but she is celebrating that she finally found the escape hatch.
It makes you realize that for her, Cliffsprings isn't an exile. It's a fortress.
That is a powerful way to put it. That dangerous road that gave her a headache, that's also a moat. It keeps him away.
So when she looked at that landscape and called it romantic and charming, maybe she wasn't talking about the trees. Maybe she was talking about the safety.
For a survivor, safety is the most romantic landscape there is.
So let's zoom out. We've gone through this one sheet of paper. What does Missouri's letter actually tell us about the American experience?
I think it tells us a story of trade-offs. We often romanticize the frontier as this place of, cowboy adventure. But for Missouri, it was a cold calculation.
A cost-benefit analysis.
Exactly. On one side of the ledger, you lose your social status, your city conveniences, your intellectual community. You deal with mud and isolation.
And on the other side,
You gain psychological liberation. You gain ownership of your day. You gain peace.
she traded civilization for freedom.
And she traded a known misery for a completely unknown future. That takes incredible resilience. To pack up your life and your daughter and bounce on a wagon for a week to live in a cabin with no guarantee of success, that's the pioneer spirit. Not the flag-waving kind, but the desperate, gritty, real kind.
It really makes you root for her. You want that oil well to come in. You want her to pay Shalitos and prove everyone wrong.
You do. You really want her to win.
But that leads to the big question mark hanging over this whole story. The gamble.
The prospect of abundance.
Right. Missouri is happy now. She has her freedom, she has her squirrels, but she is banking everything. Her debts, her standing, her daughter's future on her father, drilling a hole in the ground and striking oil.
And we know from history that for every person who struck it rich, 1,000 just struck dirt and salt water.
Speculation is a dangerous game.
It is, and that's the tension of this document. We're reading it in the moment of hope, just before the drill hits the bottom. We don't know if the oil came in. We don't know if Shalitos ever got their money.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with today. Missouri writes this letter in a bubble of optimism. She has escaped her past. But with court dates looming back in Cincinnati and that drill not yet hitting pay dirt, was this charming romantic country a permanent sanctuary? Or was it just a temporary hideout before reality came crashing back in?
It's the cliffhanger of real life. We see the bravery, but we don't get to see the ending.
And sometimes that's what makes history so human. We're just reading someone hoping for the best, same as all of us. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you next time. Stay curious.